Good morning, everybody. Hello, CDL. Hello, CDL. Okay. Did everyone have a great night last night? I hear the Drake Hotel was lovely. My name's Sonia Zenik. If we haven't met, I'm the Executive Director here at Creative Destruction Lab. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you back to day 2 of CDL Super Session. Before we start, I wish to acknowledge the land we're meeting on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on the land we are on, its history, and the people who've come before us. Here at CDL, we are a not-for-profit organization. Before we kick off for the day, I want to just remind everybody that any bit of value that's being brought to life at CDL is thanks to our visionary founding partners who are individuals who've committed to supporting CDL, our corporate partners, and our government partners. Throughout CDL Super Session, you saw the logos yesterday. You're going to see even more logos today that represent the companies that support CDL to bring it to life. Behind those logos, though, are people that are here, people from our corporate partner companies. And I just want to say these are innovators in the corporate world. They're committed to CDL, and as I mentioned, they're the reason we're able to bring all of this to life. So a big round of applause and a thank you to our founding partners, our corporate partners, and our government partners. And I didn't mention yesterday, but I want to mention today, we're joined also by, this is the finale for our year, and our CDL apprentice students. Where are our CDL apprentice students? I thought you were going to clap, but they waved. Can you? Okay, so they're over there. Thank you. There's a golf clap from one of the students. Our apprentice program has grown. It started in 2015 as a handful of students just observing a CDL session. We've now brought in over 1,000 students over the last 5 years coming in to observe the sessions, meet with founders, and inspire them to potentially, pursue a career in entrepreneurship and science. So big warm welcome to our apprentice students. They'll be joining for the venture roundtables as well. Welcome. Okay, how CDL's Super Session is going to work. We're going to have some great content in the morning, hopefully giving you lots to talk about during our networking time and our lunch. And in the afternoon, we're going to go to venture roundtables. In 2023, we had over 3,000 applicants from 87 countries, and we admitted 675 ventures and graduated about 250 of these companies. Those companies are here at Super Session yesterday and today. I'm going to zoom in on just 3 that you're going to meet today, potentially at the roundtables. Pronti AI from our CDL Atlanta Commerce stream. Pronti helps retail clothing brands increase sales by including their products in outfit recommendations to prospective customers. Pronti's mobile app analyzes users' closets, creates outfits. So I used it on me and it just gave me more suits. They give you existing closet items with compatible items from their retail partners. Vool from Stream. Vool has built a unique and novel patent-pending EV charging system, allowing up to 6 times, yes, you heard me, 6 times, more EVs to be charged simultaneously using the existing electric infrastructure. And lastly, another example is TrustPoint from CDL Space, which is a collaboration between our CDL Toronto, CDL Atlanta, and CDL Paris sites. They're developing next-generation GPS signals, leveraging low Earth orbit satellites to provide performance and reliability for self-driving cars, drones, and more. I wonder what more is. Okay, so before we get going, some operational, oh, this is from yesterday. That's my cat. It was from yesterday. Before we get going, some operational items. Slack. This is a double-threaded conversation. So you're going to see content on the stage, but we really want you to engage in the conversation or the 2 main stage channel. Also, if you have Slack on your phone, you're able to go up to any of our venture founders that you meet, scan their QR code, and it'll take you directly to their Slack post with a poll. At that poll, you can indicate if you'd like to meet with this company, interested in future financing rounds, or with customers or partners. So please do put Slack on your phone and use the QR codes. Also, CDL Bingo started yesterday. I made the mistake of making the joke that doing an arm wrestle with me was on the card. People actually came up and arm wrestled me. Yes, I won, if that was, but thank you. It was an 18-year-old but it's fine, it's fine. Okay, and lastly, all of your venture-facing documents, as usual, are in our CDL community portal. It says welcome back, Neil, because he uses the portal more than anybody, Neil Wainwright. But you can get any information on all the ventures that graduated from CDL, as well as your peers. So information on mentors, on partners. If you met someone, you can search them and find their information on the community portal. Okay, last note, operate it. This is not like typical sessions. We would like you to share on social media. We have great content. Please tag us when you share on Twitter @CreativeDLab, and also the hashtag CDL Super Session 2023. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce Professor Ajay Agarwal, the founder of CDL, the Jeffrey Tabor Chair in Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and Professor of Strategic Management at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. Please join me in welcoming Ajay.
Thanks, Sonia. Okay, thanks, Sonia. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for such an excellent day yesterday. It was really great, and appreciate everybody's input throughout the day. We opened yesterday with a whole discussion on machine intelligence. We were set in motion on this path effectively 50 years ago, or 75 years ago, with the Turing test. I propose a question, which is, can machines think? Alan Turing goes on to write, the new form of the problem can be described in terms of a game in which we call the imitation game. It is an interrogator who may be of either sex. The interrogator stays in a room apart from the other two. The object of the game for the interrogator is to determine which of the other two is the man and which is the woman. He knows them by labels X and Y. And at the end of the game, he says either X is A and Y is B, or X is B and Y is A. The interrogator is allowed to put questions to A and B thus. Tell me the length of his or her hair. Do you mind just getting me a cup of coffee, please? The coffee's right here. Thank you. You can just bring it. Bring it up. Okay. Now suppose X is actually A. Then A must answer. It is A's object in the game to try and cause C to make the wrong identification. Oh, he'll bring a coffee, thank you. His answer might therefore be, my hair is shingled, and the longest strands are about 9 inches long. In order that tones of voice may not help the interrogator, the answer should be written, or better still, typewritten. Remember, this is basically a test of deception. The ideal arrangement is to have a teleprinter communicating between the two rooms. Alternatively, the question and answers can be repeated by an intermediary. The object of the game for the third player, B, is to help the interrogator. The best strategy for her is probably to give truthful answers. She can add such things as, I am the woman. Don't listen to him. Thank you, Andreas. Don't listen to him, to her answers, but it will avail nothing as the man can make similar remarks. We now ask the question, what will happen when a machine takes the part of A in this game? Will the interrogator decide wrongly, as often when the game is played, like this, as he does when the game is played between a man and a woman? These questions replace our original. Can machines think? The objective here is to answer the question, can machines think? And the test that Alan Turing proposed in 1950 was effectively a test of deception. That was his method of measuring, have we achieved human-like intelligence? Almost 3/4 of a century later, there has been a swell of work in the so-called alignment problem. is as we approach being able to create something that feels like human-like intelligence, will that intelligence have our values? What values? Our human values. Whose human values? Open question. The most powerful AI that, in terms of accessible to the general public, is likely ChatGPT and its ilk. And a key part of the process of making that AI model sound human-like was this process of training language models to follow instructions with human feedback. Models bigger does not inherently make them better at following a user's intent. For example, large language models can generate outputs that are untruthful, toxic, or simply not helpful to the user. In other words, these models are not aligned with their users. And then in this paper, they go through to explain, how do we make this more human-like, more helpful? We start off by, after it ingests the web and it learns the correlations of words and is able to use its token sequence prediction tool to predict, which words come after which. But we want it to be more helpful, more honest, and not harmful. We'll give it examples. Humans will generate examples after it has ingested the web. And then once we give it examples, then we'll ask it in its stochastic process we'll give it some prompts, and we'll give it a prompt, it will draw from its distributions and produce 5 different answers, or 4 answers, or 3 answers, and then our humans will rank those answers. How helpful are they? How honest are they? And how harmless are they? And this will make them more human. And so many people, some people saw the headlines yesterday that Accenture has just announced a $3 billion investment in AI because they believe that in their line of business of consulting, that this is going to be a major force for all of their clients that they work with. And that announcement's just one of many. So we have these extremely powerful AIs that in text, in predicting a sequence of tokens to deceive us to sound human-like, that we are approaching human-like intelligence. But there's a fly in the ointment. The most powerful AIs in the world could not do what my 12-year-old son just did. They couldn't have brought me this cup of coffee. So he had no idea I was going to ask him. He had never gotten a coffee in this building before. The only instruction he got was the one that you just saw. I did have to inform the staff, please don't help him. So he got the instruction, he scanned the room, he figured out where there was a coffee available, he got the coffee, he didn't put any cover on it, so my hands are burning right now. And he brought it to the stage. Why is it that we don't have, despite the most powerful AIs in the world and the most advanced robotics, we don't have a machine that can do something as simple as being given an instruction in a room they've never been in to fetch a cup of coffee? We're on the path towards human-like intelligence, but we're not there yet. What you're going to hear this morning are 2 speakers, both of whom are at the frontier of pushing us closer to human-like intelligence. And then, after you see these 2, and when I say they're at the frontier, I don't mean they're in the frontier at Toronto or the frontier in Canada. They are at the global frontier. And then after you hear from these 2, then we'll enter a debate of should we be making human-like intelligence at all. Our opening guest speaker is not only the co-founder of Sanctuary, but also a person from whom I've learned an incredible amount myself. So thank you for all your patience in teaching me and so many others, and congratulations on your success so far. Suzanne Gildert.
Thank you. Hey everyone. Good morning. Hope everyone's doing good at the super session, day 2. I'm Suzanne, and I'm going to talk a little bit about human-like intelligence, as Ajay was just mentioning. So I founded this company, Sanctuary AI, and as you could imagine, on a day-to-day basis, we have a lot of discussions about what AI is and what it isn't. And so the other day, I was having an interesting discussion with my colleagues about these new, well, relatively new large language models that have kind of come on the scene and taken over everyone's minds. And I was asked this question, well, are large language models really true AI? And I said, no, of course they're not AI. There's a lot of stuff still missing. And so someone asked me in this chat we were having, well, what can't they do? And I immediately turned around and responded, well, they can't make me a cup of tea. And so this answer was supposed to be a bit humorous and slightly glib, but then I went away and I started thinking more about this, and I think it reveals some really deep truths about AI. So I was thinking about this. Let me just go and ask one. So I went to ChatGPT and I asked it to make me a cup of tea. And what it responded with was, I'm afraid I'm not able to physically interact with the world, which means I can't make a cup of tea for you. So I started thinking about this. It says it's not able to physically interact with the world or make a cup of tea, but it also says it's an artificial intelligence. So is this what AI is now? Is this the definition that we're going to accept for what AI is? Something that can't interact with the world and can't people and even other animals can go around and do in the world. So what I'm going to show you today is some of the technology what I think is missing from AI. So here is a video I'm going to show of our new technology, the 6th gen prototype that we're making. At Sanctuary, we believe that human-like AI needs a human-like body. So we build these things called general-purpose robots. This is our 6th generation prototype. It's called Phoenix, and you can see it here being run through its paces with some simple unit tests that we do. Why do we build human-like robots? Well, we believe that AI needs to interact with the world in the same way that we do in order for us to really understand it, in order for us to be able to communicate with these kind of systems as they get smarter, and in order for these kind of systems to help us in the world. The entire world is designed for people. Everywhere we go, every object we interact with, we use our hands, we use our body, we move around. This is what intelligence is. It's not things coming out of a text prompt. It's people, it's us humans using our bodies in combination with the world. Do you think a brain surgeon would be considered intelligent if you took them out of their body and they were some prompt? No. Part of the intelligence is what they're doing with their hands. It's the physical knowledge. It's that motor movement, kinesthetic knowledge. Even with athletes, athletic ability is a type of intelligence. So I want us to absolutely not think of intelligence as just being this thing that we have today where you can talk to a piece of software online. I want us to think about it much more physically. So this system that you just saw, unfortunately, is not yet being controlled by AI. I wish it was. What we do here is we actually use a technique called teleoperation. So to control this robot that you're seeing, we put a person in control of it in one of these VR gear rigs. So this is, we call them pilots. This is Eric. He's piloting the robot that you saw in that video, and he's wearing a VR headset that allows him to see what the robot's seeing. He's wearing headphones so he can hear everything the robot's hearing, and he has haptic gloves that allow him to feel the world. That exosuit he's wearing gives force feedback as well. So he's immersed in the senses and the actions of the robot. And believe me, I've done this. When you do this, you start to feel like you are a robot. So as people, we can become intimately familiar with what it's like to be a robot acting in the physical world. So why on earth would you do this, right? It seems a little bit weird. The reason we want to do this is to make sure, before we try and do anything with AI at all, that the robot is physically capable of performing the tasks that we want it to do in the world. And what we want these robots to be able to do is many, many, many different kinds of work tasks. That's the definition of a general purpose robot. So by putting a human in the loop, controlling the robot, we can make sure that we've built a worthy body for the AI mind that we're now going to try and create. So it allows us to check that the robot is physically capable. Okay, let's change track a bit. Now we've seen the robot, we've seen some teleoperation, we know that the robot is physically capable of doing things in the world. Let's go back to the GPT. So I didn't want to give up on the idea of it just telling me I can't make a cup of tea. I didn't want to give up on that, so I decided to dive a bit deeper. So I asked it, okay, can you give me a step-by-step guide on how to make tea? And it said, here I go. And then it gave me an extremely long list of how to make tea. So don't worry about reading all this. I'm originally from the UK, so I'm British, and I really appreciate nice, long, detailed lists of how to make cups of tea, but maybe most of you won't, so you don't need to worry about that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus down on one of the steps. It told me to make tea. And it was this one about adding in any extras that you like, such as sugar, honey, lemon, or milk. So if you look at these instructions, what you might notice is they're still pretty abstract and high level. They're not the kind of thing we could get a computer to do. They're not in any kind of computer programming language. They're still in natural English. However, you can use large language models to dive deeper and deeper and deeper into this process I just saw. So I said, okay, can you expand on making a cup of tea? What I said next is, okay, can you expand on step 6 in more detail? And it did. So I said, if I want to have some lemon in my tea, more details, and it gave me a new list, which was great. So the point here is what happens if you keep doing this over and over again. You keep diving into more and more and more and more details. Well, where do you get in the end? So you might think, well, you'll just end up with more and more and more and more details, and you'll never get anywhere. That's not what happens. What happens is that you get this grounding out process of the plan in what you can think of as atomic instructions or atomic actions. And the interesting thing about this is no matter what plan you send in at the start, you end up with things that look very similar when you recursively apply this process enough. So there's something really, really interesting here, because now what you might notice is these things are starting to look a little bit more like a programming language than like natural language. They're very similar. If you look at them closely, what you find is most of them comprise of a verb, which you can think of as an action, and a noun, which you can think of as a thing. So they're not all like that, but a lot of these instructions that come out of diving deeper and deeper take this sort of format. So what do we have to do? We have to figure out how to automate each of these instructions. So let's start with the nouns. Nouns are all about knowing a thing is a thing. We take this absolutely for granted. So when you look around the room, you see people and objects and walls and the environment and light fittings and stages and things like that. That's not actually what the information that's coming into your eye looks like. If you look at the signals that are going into your retina, neurons firing electrical signals, they're not objects and things. So how on earth do we look at something and say this is an object? It's actually a very, very hard problem in AI. So the way we do this, and we have to do it with a robot, is to start by moving away from the real world, because we don't want to be showing the robot millions and millions of examples of objects in the real world. It takes too long. We need to start moving into the simulated world. So here's a video of one of our technical artists who's actually modeling an object. So this is our trusty lemon from our task plan. And technical artists can actually model these in a CAD system, 3D rendering system. You can also do this using photogrammetry, so you can scan objects. And basically, you can build up a giant library of these assets, digital objects. What happens next is those objects now get placed into a simulated scene. So you've got a simulated environment, a simulated robot, and a whole bunch of simulated objects. It looks very similar to the real environment that you have. So we have somewhere to start here. What do we do next with these simulated objects? Well, we put them through a vision training pipeline. So here we use machine learning techniques. We use some pretty standard but also advanced computer vision techniques, where we take lots and lots and lots of training examples of the AI system seeing these objects together with labels. And if you show it enough times, it starts to learn what the objects are and where they are. And the only reason you can do this is because we have these simulated objects, and we can generate thousands or millions of training examples of them. So what you get at the end of this process is you now get your robot system in simulation with the objects. Now when the robot looks down, it sees objects as things, as nouns, not just pixels anymore. It actually knows both what these things are now and where they are in the scene. So we're able to get the system to understand what things are. And this generalizes. You can do this with any object as long as you can either model it or scan it. And in the future, this will be able to be done in real time. So the robot itself, over to a part of the environment it doesn't understand, it'll be able to look at something and learn what this object is in real time. So we've basically solved the nouns problem. It's pretty cool. Okay, so we talked a little bit about verbs. So verbs are all about acting on the world. So this is where this physical intelligence part of things comes in. So how on earth do we learn actions? Think about how we learned actions as a species, as the human race. It took thousands and thousands and thousands of generations of trial and error, of animals trying things out in their environment. The ones that had the best actions, the ones that had the best motor muscle plans, were the ones that survived. So we do the same thing with our robots. Thousands and thousands of instances of these simulated robots, and they try and do something. Here it's trying to grasp the lemon, so we're trying to automate the grasp command by trial and error. And I think this is a lovely segue into Rich Sutton's talk, because Rich is the founding father of reinforcement learning. So none of what I'm talking about would be possible without these techniques. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say on this. So big shout out and thanks to Rich Sutton for giving us the tools for AI. Woo! Yeah, there you go. So it basically learns to grasp. And it's not just grasp. you can actually train it to do anything. So we just picked grasp here for this particular example, but the things that you do with your hands. So that brings us onto an important point. I mentioned this instruction set, breaking down work into actions. What you find is that in order to get something that's a human-like intelligence, you need to have a lot of those instructions focused on the hand. Most of what we do in our day-to-day lives involves our hands. If you don't believe this, just watch yourself when you're at home for an hour or so and just clock how many things you actually do with your hands when you're doing housework. So in order for this whole thing to work, we need to build the world's most advanced robot hands. So these hands are, I believe, the world's most advanced robot hands. If anyone wants to debate me on that, please bring your robot. We will have a thumb wrestling contest. Happy to do that. And the reason is that hands is where AI meets the world in a dexterous manipulation way. I want to show you some of the cool things that this hand can do. It can actually, if you watch the next one it's doing, it actually slides the finger down like this. There's about 20 different degrees of freedom and ways that this hand can move, so it's pretty advanced. It also has force control, so it can apply force really lightly or, pick up a really heavy suitcase. And it also has haptic sensing in the fingertips, so the robot can actually feel the world. Okay. So once we've automated these instructions one by one, we can put them together in a big list like this and create an interface. So now a person is clicking on these instructions, essentially this programming language that's been created. So we click on grasp, and then if you look, we click on one of the nouns. All those objects are now available as nouns. So you can click on a verb and click on a noun. And now this system will actually execute that full instruction. So what we've done here, if any of you are computer nerds like me, you'll like this. We've created a programming language, and we've created a compiler. The programming language is those action instructions. The compiler is all that machine learning stuff going on behind the scenes to take those instructions, turn them into physical action. So that's the compiler system that allows us to do this. The cool thing about this is that it generalizes as well. So here's a view of the same thing. What we did is we moved the position of the lemon very slightly, and we told the robot to use its other hand, I believe. Okay, that one's not going to work.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, this. And this one demonstrates that it actually generalizes into the real world as well. So here you can see the robot hand on the real robot. Now it's physically transferred over to the real robot. It grabs the lemon. So the cool thing about this is that if the simulation is close enough to reality, it will transfer across out of the simulated world and onto your real robot. So that's pretty cool. So remember, we can train any command using this reinforcement learning approach and these vision machine learning approaches and transfer them over to the real robot. So all this stuff about making tea isn't like that interesting to most people. But the thing to remember is it's not just making tea. This process can be applied to any work task. So you can take any task, you can break it down, you can extract a small number of these instructions, which are mostly the same across all tasks. You automate them one by one, and then you have a robot system that is capable of doing any work. I want to emphasize again that there's only 3 things you need for this to work. And this is super important, because remember, what we're talking about here is a robot system that, if these 3 things hold true, will be able, as it advances and matures, will be able to go out there in the world and do any work task. You only need 3 things. You need a robot body that's physically capable of doing the task, which we can test using teleoperation. You need an instruction set that's well formulated and is able to capture what it means to do work and is able to generalize over different objects and different action types. And then you need machine learning approaches and reinforcement learning approaches to take those instructions and compile them down into the actual signals and the actions that run on the robot. So we have the 3 ingredients. All that's missing is practicing making the cake. Okay, so what I want to end with is firstly to describe, coming full circle back to our discussion of the large language models, that I think in the future these large language models will not only be able to make a cup of tea, they'll be able to do any work. And the final thing I want to show is a quick compilation of where I think robots are going in terms of being able to do lots and lots of different tasks. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, invite up Jordy and Rich. Thank you very much for that, Suzanne. And the reason that we wanted to open with that is to give you a physical instantiation in order to put what you're about to hear from Professor Sutton into context. So in other words, he, of course, as Suzanne described, and Jordy's going to give him a proper introduction, but has done the work that has allowed things like what you just saw to come to life. Jordy? And Jordy is the CEO and founder, along with Suzanne, of Sanctuary.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ajay. So I have the great honor of introducing Rich Sutton to y'all. When Ajay first asked me to do this, my instinct was to go back through my historical notes and look back to my early interactions with Rich, because I've known him for a long time, almost 10 years now. And so I went back through our interactions, and I take extensive notes of all the meetings that I'm in, and I essentially cold emailed him. And by the way, those of you who aren't in the computer science or machine learning fields, cold emailing Rich Sutton is kind of like cold emailing Mick Jagger. He's an absolute superstar, one of the leading lights in the entire field. So I was nervous, of course. So I went back over my notes, and I wanted to just repeat to you what the summary sentence. The summary sentence was, he is a really nice guy. So for all of his technical accomplishments and kudos, all of the wonderful things that he's brought to us as a community. And by the way, much of the modern AI infrastructure that we're talking about today and has taken the world by storm is grounded in Rich's work. Rich is the originator of many of the ideas that now have come to take hold and are so important to us now and in the future. So for all of that, the one thing that really stood out is how good of a human he was. You know, when people get fame, sometimes they get kind of weird. Rich has never been like that. Rich has always been very friendly. He's always been very supportive of me personally. I look up to him as a kind of a person that I would aspire to be like, not just scientifically, but also just as a good human being. So I don't want to go and just read his bio because you can go and read it for yourself. But one thing I wanted to just close on is that he's often referred to as the founding father of reinforcement learning, which Suzanne alluded to. So reinforcement learning is more than just a set of techniques. It's more than just a textbook. I would think of it as a coherent worldview of the philosophy of mind. So why are we and other animals different than things like rocks and podiums? So Rich's work is aimed at what I would think of as a fundamental cosmic problem, or unraveling maybe the most mysterious and important question that we can ask as people is, what are we? What makes us who we are? And his work over many, many decades has not only approached this from the philosophical perspective, but also has contributed immensely to the technical progress of being able to do it in the real world. So without further ado, my good friend and spiritual mentor, I suppose, Rich Sutton.
Thank you, Jordy. Hey, let's go here. It's a great pleasure to talk to you all. Everyone's been so nice. I've really enjoyed my time here. At the same time, I feel a little bit out of place. I feel, I'm explicitly a scientist. I seek understanding. And sometimes, I'd like the world to become a better place, but that's not my main day-to-day goal. And whereas I feel it is your goal. It's a really great goal, and I appreciate it. And so I feel I'm a little bit different, but we all fit in, and I feel like I fit in anyway. So, as an AI scientist, understand intelligence well enough to create it, ultimately to create beings of greater intelligence than current people. This profound intellectual milestone will enrich our economies and challenge all of our societal institutions. It will be unprecedented and transformational, but also it's just a continuation of trends that are thousands of years old. People have always created tools and have been changed by them. This is what humans do. The next big step, is to understand ourselves. This is a quest, grand and glorious, quintessentially human. So those are my words. As I wrote them, I realized this is what I have taken for granted for a long time, for decades, because I've been in this field for like 45 years. And then I'm realizing now that these views are not universally shared. Maybe people are worried about AI, and I just didn't have that perspective at all. I had this other perspective. And so I wondered, where did it come from? If it seemed obvious to me, and then where does it come from? And who was the first to express this point of view? And so I dug around and realized that the first person who expressed it best, is Hans Moravec. Hans Moravec is a roboticist and computer vision researcher, Carnegie Mellon University. And I want to share with you his words. He wrote several books on this, 1998. Now, next slide has a little bit of his words, and I want to try to, but I'm going to read a little bit more than what's on the slide, just because I think it's pertinent to what we're all worrying about now. Okay, so Hans Moravec, 1998, on the ascent of man to AI. Barring cataclysms, I consider the development of intelligent machines a near-term inevitability. Rather quickly, they could displace us from existence. I'm not as alarmed as many, since I consider these future machines our progeny, mind children built in our image and likeness, ourselves in more potent form. They will embody humanity's best hope for a long-term future. And then this key perspective on what we do about this, because so far it's just observations. What to do about it, he says, it behooves us to give them every advantage and to bow out when we can no longer contribute. That makes sense to me. That seems humble. That seems appropriate. We are not the last step in the universe. We are an important step in the universe. Then he has a final line, which is comforting, where he says, we can probably arrange for comfortable retirement before we fade away. Okay, I like that. So, now one more thing I want to say is that we're not there yet. The economic value of AI is immense and apparent, but the greatest prizes are not yet within reach. We need more fundamental research, and to help do this, for my part in this, I've formed a new nonprofit company focused on a particular plan for how to do AI research. It's called I call it the Alberta Plan for AI Research. Michael Bowling, Patrick Pilarski, and I written it up, put it out on archive. You can all welcome to take a look at that. It's a 12-step plan to AI. So we want to pursue that. I want to pursue that, and I'm developing a nonprofit organization like 5 people, and I'm worrying now about the question about what's the right way to fund fundamental research into AI. I'm trying to figure that out, and I think it should be it should not be through government. It should be through private donations, and I'm trying to think through the best way to think about that. And if you have any ideas about it, I'd be interested to talk to you about it in the rest of the time of the conference. Okay, but what I want to do today is I want to express some optimism about the long-term future of AI, which I've already done. And then I want to tell you about, next slide, I'll tell you about the grand rivalry between supervised learning and reinforcement learning that you may not be aware of, and then outline some views on what are the essential elements of AI. So the grand rivalry, supervised learning and reinforcement learning. Now you may be thinking these are 2 methods, but really they're 2 different problems. You have to understand that they're different problems. They're different ways of formulating the problem. So supervised learning is like the 800-pound gorilla. It's much bigger, larger. And reinforcement learning is like the younger brother. And we feel a rivalry. And of course, I'm going to give you my point of view, which is the reinforcement learning point of view on the rivalry. But I'll try to be somewhat objective. Supervised learning from examples, as opposed to reinforcement learning. You learn from reward. Supervised learning, the correct answers are given. Whereas in reinforcement learning, the agent has to discover the right answers. In supervised learning, the feedback is immediate. You're given the desired behavior immediately after the input. And in reinforcement learning, there may be delays. You think about if you're playing chess, you might make many moves, and then finally you find out what the outcome was. You won or you lost. And all you're told is win or lose, which is like a bit. And you had to make all those moves. And so in supervised learning, you would have been told, this is the correct move. In reinforcement learning, you have to make a move and see what happens. It's like, more like life, where you do things and then good things and bad things happen. And from that, you learn what to do. So the basic sense, supervised learning is just easier. And because it's easier, we can have and simpler, you can have a better theory, you can have better results, better applications. So it's all winning, but of course, it's not the general case, and we would like to extend supervised learning towards the needs of getting your data, getting your learning from experience without having labeled examples. Okay, so that's the rivalry. And the rivalry comes from they're each being large fields with their own literatures. Few people can understand both literatures, and so they compete for mind share. And as I talk to people around here, I find that you may, unless you're really into it, you may just think that AI is supervised learning. And so that, of course, is disappointing to me. So anyway, okay, but I don't want to be, you know, disappointed. You know, I've been very successful, and reinforcement learning is very successful. There's a huge community pursuing it, but still we feel the rivalry. And so when there's all this success for the large language models, which are primarily based on supervised learning, I am happy for them, but also somewhat jealous. Like a pure success moment, but a little bit of a disappointment moment. You know, like, so throughout my life, this is a rivalry that's lasted like 70 years. I'm not 70 years old yet, but it's a really old thing. It goes back to the 50s, and it just keeps, you know, I always think, you know, supervised learning, okay, that's great, but enough already. Like, we did that. We had pattern recognition, we did that. And eventually we'd get to the point where we're just putting a little bit improvement on how accurately we match the training set, and then we'd be ready to move on to the real thing, which would be reinforcement learning. But instead, the supervised learning guys keep finding new things to do, large language models. So once again, they keep succeeding. Now, you know, I really should show you like all the examples of impressive things that reinforcement learning can do. I'm not going to do that. But you know them, like AlphaGo is reinforcement learning. The race car driving is reinforcement learning. The Atari games, the game playing, all the game playing is reinforcement learning. Lots of impressive things. You saw just the things that Suzanne just showed us involved reinforcement learning, and they are a part of that. Okay, so lots of successes. So what do we want from our AIs? We want them to act intelligently. I would say we want them to learn from normal operation, and we want them to be able to plan or reason about what to do. And what I'm basically going to say, suggested by the triangle, is that we can have things that act intelligently. ChatGPT will act intelligently, but it doesn't meet the second goal. It doesn't learn from normal operation. ChatGPT learns from a lot of large training data from the whole internet, but then once you encounter ChatGPT, once you interact with it, it's no longer learning. All those weight changes were done in advance. There are no weight changes while you're interacting with it. So really we're only halfway through step 2 because, well, the reinforcement learning systems will learn from their normal experience. And planning is in its infancy. So, oh, that's the backward button. Then the new things I want to talk about, I'll talk about just very briefly, give you a sense of them. The two big things that I'm keen on are model-based reinforcement learning and dynamic learning networks. And so the first question is why? Why these? And I just see them as the major steps, next steps to strong AI. And then I have a bunch of definitions, and I'll go through these individually in the next few slides. Let me just skip ahead. An agent. The agent is something that perceives and acts, so it interacts with the world, takes an action, sees observations, uses the observation to decide what the next action should be. And so ChatGPT will follow this model. Lots of our systems will follow this model. And these are the systems that can't learn because they're interacting with the world. They don't have a goal. There's no sense of what they did being right or wrong, better or worse, correct or incorrect. You need a goal. to live your life and you do stuff, and to know how to get better, you have to have a goal. GTP has no goal. It has nothing that it's trying to do. It has nothing, we might want it to be correct, but it doesn't know what it means to be correct. It has no way of measuring correctness. It has no goal. So reinforcement learning adds a goal, and we add that goal just as a separate input, a scalar input, a number that you receive at each point in time. That's called the reward. It's like pleasure and pain, comfort and discomfort. Maybe even something like curiosity could be an additional component to the reward. So once you have a reward, you can then have a basis for improving yourself. You can say, well, this way of behaving gets worse than that way of behaving, and so you can change and improve. And that stuff is not present in many of our small AI, even though they can't learn from their ordinary behavior. Okay, so that's maybe the only thing that I'll try to express to you really clearly. But once you have the reward, you have to learn values. Values are not the same as the rewards. Rewards are what's ultimately good, like pleasure and pain. But values, what are values? Values are, is this state good? Is it good to be where I am now? And that is, to give that meaning, well, one obvious meaning is that a state is good if it leads to high reward. A state is bad if it leads to pain, but low reward. And so this is the simple theory of value. And just notice that you could have systems that have different rewards. We all have different rewards, right? My pleasure and pain signal is not your pleasure and pain signal. It's a different signal going into our different minds. Our goals, our ultimate rewards are totally different, but we might have the same values, recognizing that the world we want, that's good for me, is also good for you. But they're different. And so our values can well be aligned, depending on the world, like our world is, even if the rewards are different. Interesting philosophy. Okay, now what else can I hope to say today? I could hope to explain the 4 components. Let me just say them. The 4 components is perception, turn the observations into a sense of where you are. The policy, quickly map where you are to what to do. The value function says how good that was based on rewards. And then the transition model for model-based reinforcement learning learns what follows what in the world. And that's what enables you to plan the 3rd step, or to reason, and where you use the model in place of the world. So let me just try to show this demo. This is a really toy-like demo, but maybe we can actually understand it. So the little square is the agent moving around from state to state in this world. If it reaches the goal, it gets a reward of +1, and then it learns the path from start to goal. The arrows represent the policy. The color, the green, represents the value function. It learns which states lead more quickly to the goal, and they are given higher value, even though their reward is 0. But some states lead to the reward, and some states don't. And because it receives a reward, you can change the world, and the system will adapt. What used to work no longer gets reward, so it's disappointed by that. Those states will all decrease in value, and eventually the agent has to stumble on the new location of the goal, but when it does, it will be able to relatively quickly plot a path, a policy that takes it directly to the goal. And you notice that it forms a good path even for states far away from the goal that it has never been to, or hasn't been to since the goal moved, and that's because it has a model of the world and it's using that to plan. So planning enables you to compute the consequences of the new situation, the new world, much more quickly than it would if you were just learning from experience. So this system is doing 10 steps of planning in its imagination for every real step in the world. It does the step in the world, goes from one state to the next, and imagines states in its mind. I might be there, and what if I was there? What would happen if I was to go up? And then, oh, I would get to a state that has a higher value, so that would be good. And so I'll plan to do that when I next get there. Well, that's the image of planning as the third step. So these are our three steps. We want to act, we want to learn, we want to plan or reason. So dynamic learning networks, I won't really talk about. They're just trying to enable us to learn continually. It's sort of almost surprising that modern systems, deep learning systems, even if you give them more examples, they are unable to handle them efficiently, and we need to fix that. So, in summary, a full AI, a strong AI, should be able to act, learn, and plan. AI excitement is about agents that neither learn nor plan. ChatGPT doesn't learn, doesn't plan. Their intelligence comes from the people who constructed them. They can't adapt in any way during normal operation. They can't adapt their weights in any way. Today, almost every AI system that both acts and learns is a reinforcement learning system. There are also RL agents that plan as well as learning and acting, learning the model, learning the policy, and they're called model-based reinforcement learning agents. They still have a long way to go. They need continual learning, dynamic learning nets, but they're coming, and they should be ready by the time the computer power is ready in 2029. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. CDL has a reading group, and we've been reading books basically shortly after COVID started. We started the reading group. It started with a handful of students, and then CDL mentors joined, and now there's about 300 people or so that are part of the reading group. And the reading group is at a time when the lines between humans and machines are starting to blur. What does it mean to be human? And we read some fiction, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, nonfiction, like the books that I had up there a moment ago, for example, Stuart Russell's book. And during those discussions, Rich has been part of many of them, and as Jordy, at the end of the sessions, we ask for feedback, and one of the most common feedbacks that we receive is people appreciating the back and forth between Rich and Jordy to understand what's going on. So I asked Jordy if he would just spend a few minutes to translate or to interpret, some of the points that Rich made and connect them to what people are building.
Oh, thanks, Ajay. So Rich, in his concluding remarks, flashed something very quickly that you might not have caught. It was a date. It was 2029. So that's not that far away. I hope all of you will too. That kind of date, at least some people who work in these associated fields of trying to build truly human-like intelligence, think that there might be a transition to being able to build technology that's very much like us around that time period. This, if it can be done, will absolutely dwarf any of the impacts that AI has, or what's called AI has today. What we have today is a pale shadow of the human experience and capability. We're on the verge of being able to build machines that not only think like us, but can translate those thoughts into actions like us. The kinds of things that you're familiar with only from science fiction. Technology is progressing so quickly that that future that always seemed so far away is now upon us. How can you affect this future? And I have a suggestion for you. People like Rich think about the problem in the right way, not only technologically, socially. When he was showing those slides at the beginning, at least my personal opinion is, that is the most positive way to approach from a social perspective what's about to happen. So you can make a difference here. Rich mentioned that he's starting an organization of AI superstars that are going to be working on this problem. A very small group, but that small group requires funding. And it's not a business. You're not going to make any money by helping Rich out. But what you will do is you'll shift the course of history, if he's right. Because this very small amount pulls a very big lever. And that lever could eventually create the conditions within the groups that are associated with us now to be the first to actually produce this technology in the world, which will be, without a doubt, the most important development in human history. All of the rest of the things that we put on the roadmap of human progress in comparison to replicating the properties of our own minds. And I just want to make the point again, if I'm not clear, there are many people who believe we're right on the cusp of doing that. The most important thing that's ever happened in the history of human civilization now, with the people that, some of them in this room. So it's a very exciting time, but the future is not written in stone, and you have an ability to affect this. If you're interested in participating in this, I would implore you to reach out to Rich and connect with him, especially if you're interested in investing in this sort of thing, not as a business, but as a lever that can pull technology in the right direction. And thank you.